On a regular night, a man walked into a crowded bar full of cameras. Security footage captured him clearly entering, but he was never seen leaving. No back exit confirmed, no body found, no financial trail, and no verified sightings. One of the most documented entrances, followed by one of the most impossible disappearances. Tonight, we open the file on the disappearance of Brian Shaffer. If you're just joining us, you're watching the Dark Case Journal, where real cases, hidden truths, and unresolved mysteries are documented piece by piece. Don't forget to click the subscribe and notification button to lock in. Now let's get started. Brian Randall Shaffer was not someone you'd expect to vanish. He was 27 years old, a second-year medical student at Ohio State University, described as intelligent, social, and driven. One of his close friends remembers him this way. He was the type who could talk to anyone, calm, funny, observant. He blended easily into any crowd but left a strong impression once you knew him. But behind the progress and academic success, Brian was carrying personal weight. His mother had died of cancer only weeks earlier. People close to him said the loss hit him hard. Still, he kept moving forward, attending classes and hanging out with friends. He was in a relationship and had a future career lined up. He even had an upcoming vacation planned. Nothing in his life suggested someone preparing to disappear, which makes what happened next even more disturbing. March 31st, 2006, a Friday night in Columbus, Ohio. Brian went out with his friend William Clint Florence. The plan was simple: unwind, bar hop, and relax after exams. They started at a steakhouse bar, drinking, talking, keeping things casual. Later that night, they moved to a popular nightlife spot called the Ugly Tuna Saloon. It was located in a busy entertainment complex, all South Campus Gateway. Important detail: the bar entrance was heavily covered by surveillance cameras, positioned specifically to capture everyone going in and out. At approximately 1:55 a.m., Brian Shaffer is clearly seen on camera entering the bar area. He stops outside briefly, talks with two women, smiles. He appears relaxed. Nothing looks unusual. Nothing looks forced. Nothing looks like a goodbye. That footage would become historic because it would be the last confirmed visual record of Brian Shaffer alive. Inside, the night continued normally, at least on the surface. Witnesses later reported that Brian seemed in good spirits. No fights, no visible conflict, no emotional breakdown. He was social, conversational, drinking, but not described as out of control. At some point, his friend Clint and his girlfriend became separated from Brian inside the bar. This is not unusual in a crowded late-night venue. Closing time approached around 2:00 a.m. Clint tried calling Brian. No answer. He assumed Brian had left with someone else or stepped out. That assumption would haunt the investigation later, because when police reviewed surveillance footage, they found something impossible. Investigators pulled every available camera angle from the complex. They expected to track Brian leaving the same way he entered, but frame after frame, hour after hour, they never saw him exit. Let that sink in. The entrance camera captured Brian going in, dozens of other patrons leaving, staff exiting, late-night traffic. But not Brian Shaffer. Police expanded the review. They checked alternate exits, service doors, emergency routes, connected hallways. Still nothing. It appeared on camera that Brian entered the bar and then ceased to exist. This wasn't a missing camera tape. It wasn't corrupted footage. It wasn't a recording gap. The cameras were working, which created the central mystery. How does someone disappear from a location covered by surveillance without being seen leaving? At first, investigators considered simple explanations. Maybe he left through a staff exit. Maybe cameras missed a blind spot. Maybe footage timing was misaligned. But each possibility ran into problems. The staff exit required passing through monitored areas. No employee reported seeing him leave. No exterior camera picked him up. Another theory: he changed clothes. But no discarded clothing was found, no bag, no evidence of a disguise. Then came another strange detail. Construction was happening near the building at the time, including restricted access areas and temporary barriers. Could he have slipped into a construction zone? Police searched thoroughly. No trace. No accident signs. No remains. No disturbed materials. Nothing. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people are reported missing, but a terrifying fraction become cold cases, vanishing from seemingly safe locations. Unlike cases involving foul play on a deserted road, Brian's disappearance from a crowded, monitored public space defies the typical patterns, making it an outlier among outliers. Brian's phone activity after that night was minimal and strange. It rang for several days, going straight to voicemail. Then it stopped connecting to the network entirely. Months later, one unexplained ping hit a tower. Investigators could never confirm whether it was meaningful or an error. No bank activity followed his disappearance. No passport used, no credit card charges. No confirmed sightings. A medical student with a future vanished into silence. But what investigators discovered next changed the direction of the case. Because, when they slowed down the entrance footage frame by frame, they noticed a timing anomaly involving the people Brian spoke to just before entering. A detail most viewers missed but detectives couldn't ignore, and it would raise a new question. Was Brian supposed to meet someone inside that bar? When investigators reviewed the surveillance again, this time slower, something subtle stood out. Not an exit, but a pattern. People entering the bar were clearly captured, faces visible, movements trackable, clothing identifiable. But the exit flow was messy. Crowds overlapped, groups merged. People blocked one another from view as they passed through the camera frame. This raised a technical possibility, not that Brian didn't leave, but that he may have left hidden inside a visual cluster. In other words, he could have exited behind or beside another group at the exact moment the camera's line of sight was obstructed. Video analysts call this occlusion masking. It's rare, but real. Still, investigators weren't satisfied with that explanation alone, because they ran exit comparisons. They matched height, build, clothing tones, and movement style of every male exiting within the time frame. None matched Brian with confidence, not one. Which brought the case back to the same question. If he left, where is the visual proof? Attention then shifted to staff-only areas. Bars are complex behind the scenes: storage corridors, supply doors, waste exits, delivery puffs. Police examined whether Brian could have slipped into a restricted area, intentionally or by mistake. Employees were interviewed one by one. Managers, bartenders, security, cleaning crew. No one reported escorting him out. No one reported seeing him lost or disoriented backstage. No access alarms triggered that night. But investigators noted something important. Late-night closing environments are chaotic. Music loud, lights low. Staff busy, doors sometimes propped. Briefly during cleanup. Meaning opportunity windows can exist without being remembered later. Still, opportunity is not evidence. And there was still no physical trace. Behavioral analysts were asked a different question. Did Brian show psychological indicators of voluntary disappearance? The profile didn't fit. Yes, he was grieving his mother's death. Yes, stress was present, but his forward plans were active. He had scheduled classes, upcoming travel, relationship commitments, academic deadlines. Voluntary disappearances usually show behavioral leakage, small signs of preparation, money shifts, digital searches, emotional withdrawal, loose ends tied quietly. None were found. His bank activity stopped. His academic access stopped. His digital life froze. It looked less like someone leaving and more like someone interrupted. Clint, Brian's friend, called him multiple times that night after they became separated. Phone records confirmed the attempts, all unanswered. But here's the detail that investigators debated later. If Brian had stepped outside even briefly, he likely would have seen or heard the calls. Unless his phone was silenced, his battery died, or he was no longer in control of it. Each possibility leads to very different conclusions. Search efforts began quickly once Brian was officially reported missing. Police searched nearby streets, sparking structures, constructing zones, rooftop access points, utility space, nothing. No personal items, no drop phone. No wallet, no signs of struggle. Hospitals were checked, arrest records checked, transport logs reviewed, no matches. It was as if he passed through a boundary and left the searchable grid entirely. Cases like this are sometimes described by investigators with a chilling phrase, closed environment disappearance, where the last confirmed location is controlled, but the exit is not observed. Those cases are statistically rare and notoriously difficult to solve. At this stage, the investigation began dividing into two camps. One side believed Brian exited unseen, and something happened afterward outside camera coverage. The other side believed the disappearance is connected to the building itself, its layout, its access routes, or someone familiar with its internal paths. Neither side could prove their position, but one developing theory, still controversial, began gaining quiet attention inside investigative circles. A theory involving knowledge of restricted pathways and possible assistance, because when building access patterns and late-night staff movement were mapped together, investigators identified a narrow scenario where someone could leave the monitored zone without appearing on the primary exit camera at all. But that scenario requires one critical condition. Brian would not have been alone, and that possibility opens an entirely different direction for the case. Stay tuned for Part 2, which will be uploaded shortly. In the meantime, we thank you all for the time and support expended. This is the Dark Case Journal.